We're live.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kinneret, and I'm the Research Community Officer here on the Wikimedia Research team. I'd like to welcome you to this very special Research Showcase. Research Showcases are monthly convenings organized by our team to recognize and share recent research on or relevant to the Wikimedia project. For those of you joining live, we welcome you to ask questions of the speakers in the YouTube chat. As always, we will monitor this channel and pass questions to the speakers. We kindly ask that attendees follow the friendly space policy and universal code of conduct. We don't have any special announcements today, so without further ado, I'll turn it over to Isaac.
Thank you, Kinneret. Hello, everybody. I'm Isaac Johnson. I'm a senior research scientist at the Wikimedia Foundation. I'm very glad to introduce the December 2023 Research Showcase. So it's been about a year since ChatGPT was released into the world, and so like many a podcast and news article, it felt like a good time to reflect on how things have changed and what's next. So instead of our usual like two presentation format, we're going with a panel today. Some very exciting folks to kind of comment on the last year and what's ahead. And I'll also say, like many a commentator, and also like to start with a pot shot at Sam Altman, the newly reminted CEO of OpenAI. In particular, I was listening to a podcast, I guess, about 2 weeks ago, where they were talking about him and with him, and so they also asked him for his reflections, and he had said he had not been doing much reflecting this year because he's been so busy. And so I'm hoping that our panel hopefully does a little bit better job than that. In fact, I'm very certain that they will because we do a lot of reflection here. But this panel, it brings together three outstanding folks from different parts of the Wikimedia community who all have longstanding connections with the Wikimedia projects, but can speak to some of the different aspects of some of these bigger questions around generative AI and the Wikimedia projects. In turn, I'm going to very briefly introduce each person, but I'm going to allow them to say a bit more about who they are. And I've also asked them to start by reflecting on the question of what has surprised them about the last year of developments. So I think first, we're going to start with Robert West. He's a longtime Wikimedia researcher and a fellow of the Wikimedia research team. Bob's been doing some really interesting work around AI opportunities and risks, including developing a generative model that was recently piloted on the Wikimedia Android app to recommend article descriptions. And this is a project I was also part of, but I think it's a really excellent example of well-constrained generative AI. So I'm very excited to have Bob here with us today. And Bob, I will pass it to you now.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. I'm connected from Switzerland, by the way, from EPFL. Yeah, I've been working with Wikimedia for a long time, and it's really been exciting to see how in the last year, Wikimedia has really embraced this new development. I'm used to Wikimedia as a very skeptical community also, which is good. But here, I think if Wikimedia folks really jump onto this, it means that I think it's something big. I was surprised by this kind of positive embracing. So something big is happening, and it's great to be part of it early on.
Thank you, Bob. I can definitely resonate with that one. And yeah, I'm also generally a very skeptical person, but as I'll say in a little bit, have been slowly coming into some of the more embracing pieces. Thank you. And then, next we'll go with Barkeep. Barkeep's a contributor and sysapp or admin on English Wikipedia. And in the context of AI and Wikipedia in particular, Barkeep has been especially well known for his prescient essay, I should say, on the potential slow deaths of Wikipedia and the role AI might play in this. Barkeep, I'm going to pass it to you now to introduce yourself.
So as mentioned, I'm Barkeep, and I edit primarily English Wikipedia, and really started thinking about the impact of AI on Wikipedia about 3 years ago, and saw the potential ways that AI could really kind of reshape the Wikipedia's place in the English world's cultural context. I think it is a really important reference source now, and AI has the potential to really change that as people just get their answers from AI rather than coming to sources like Wikipedia. So that's a lot of what I have been thinking about over the last 3 years. And I guess my big surprise for the last year is I spent a lot of time playing with GPT-3. And so when GPT 3.5 came out and everyone started freaking out about it, I was like, well, what's so revolutionary here? And so that's the part that has kind of surprised me. And I think it's really about the ease of interface, rather than kind of the leap in kind of abilities. And I think I think there's a real leap from 3 to 4, and 4 is really kind of changing some ball games in some interesting ways. But my big surprise was seeing kind of the small interface tweak along with some modest refinements really is what caused AI to hit the popular consciousness in a way that the previous versions had not.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's a really important piece too, because I know a lot of my thinking about this has been to what degree are things hype, it's like, oh, now it's in the public imagination. And so there's a lot of hype versus like actual new functionality that would be useful. So I think we'll be getting back to kind of those sorts of questions as we go. And finally, I'm going to introduce our third panelist, Mariana Pinchuk, who's currently the leader of the Future Audiences Initiative at the Wikimedia Foundation, but is someone who has also worn many hats at the Wikimedia Foundation and outside too. So bringing some product perspective, but I'm sure so much more too. Pass it to you, Mariana.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I've been tracking AI for professional and personal reasons over the course of the year. I've been really interested to see the space evolve. In my last stint in product at Wikimedia, I was the product manager on our mobile products, which at the time was the big revolutionary technology that was going to change everything and maybe destroy Wikipedia and maybe destroy knowledge. So it's funny to relive this moment again with AI. We made it through mobile, so I think I have good hopes for us. I think the thing that I'm most surprised by, just kind of building off what Barkeep was saying, is that this AI revolution that's happened in the last year actually tracks really interestingly to some of the kind of bigger changes in user behavior trends that I've been following really since 2019. And in particular, the idea of knowledge increasingly becoming really fraught and fought over, and arbiters of knowledge being hard to really suss out in the world, and personalities becoming kind of really important in this space more than platforms or publishers. And so I think one of the underappreciated elements of ChatGPT, what made it really successful, is that it was able to actually mimic a person, a human who you could have a connection with, you could have a conversation with, and maybe one of the reasons why it succeeded so well, and other much more well-positioned technology companies with their AI products maybe didn't succeed, is this kind of personal element that ChatGPT has. So that was really interesting and surprising to me.
Thank you, Mariana. Yeah, stretching kind of that piece, I'm wondering maybe we can talk a little bit about the ability to humanize some of the Wikipedia editing or some of those aspects too, because I think that is a really important kind of insight into why some of these technologies have been so big. Well, thank you all. So I'm going to lead us through about 15 minutes of discussion here, and then we're going to be opening up our discussion to include questions from other folks in the room with us, as well as questions on YouTube. So just kind of letting folks know that that's how I'm going to go. I'll say that personally, coming into this, I was, to Bob's point, relatively skeptical or dismissive of some of these technologies at the start of the year. But I've learned a lot. Like I got the chance to attend the Wikimedia Hackathon in May and talked to a lot of folks there and understand kind of the ways in which people were thinking about using these models. And I think it's really helped me to understand that there's this really long tail of needs on the project where folks want assistance around all sorts of hyper-specific tasks. And these models offer kind of an opportunity to support some of those needs in a way that I don't think we really had potential solutions before. And I think if I'm talking about surprise, that's for me coming around to that realization has been a big one. And I think that's also kind of my ulterior motive maybe for this panel, which is like I really want to think about like how do we support those long tail. So some of the questions I've been thinking about in preparation for this are kind of dancing around that question of like what is the right path forward for trying to provide some of those supports. I think we'll always have like very key shared services, things like machine translation, things like summarization. I know that we're currently looking into where it's like, hey, this is a core piece that should be within the projects and that we should provide support for. But I do think there's a lot of needs where some of these new generative AI models might also offer opportunities. And so with that, I'm going to kick off our question or discussion. And the first question is going to go to Bob. And is that, I think over the last year, obviously we had the initial release with the chat kind of interface, but we've seen a lot of advances as far as like ways to control these models, around prompting and things like that. And I know that you've done some work around flows, thinking about how do you connect these models with people to actually achieve certain tasks. And most recently, OpenAI had the GPT, so folks have been kind of following that as like these ways to make it easy to kind of engage with these models around specific goals. And so I wanted to kind of hear from you a little bit about whether you think that sort of like general model that's hosted, by some company somewhere, combined with these like expressive ways of prompting the model and things like that, whether that is kind of the viable future, that is the way we're going, or if there's certain kind of maybe tasks and things like that where we're still going to want access to the model weights, we're still going to want the ability to really like carefully fine tune and adjust and kind of align these models. So I kind of wanted to hear your perspectives on where that's going.
I think it depends, right? There's this long tail of tasks, and I think the only way to handle that is by having a big generalist model that that can follow instructions ad hoc without needing to be fine-tuned. It might be more expensive to run such a model because it's going to be a big model, but that's not going to be feasible for everything. If you will have a lot of tasks that come in at several per second, like every Wikipedia edit could be double checked, check the spelling, check the automate and edit summary, and so on. And for those, you probably wouldn't want to push all of those through a huge model of billion scale or hundreds of billion scale parameters. So there you might want to fork something smaller that can solve that task. But still, I think those small models will still depend in critical ways on the big model, because something that we've seen in a recent project, the one, Isaac, that you're part of, edit summaries, we saw that the best training data for small models is actually data that was generated by a big model. So this training data is better than training data that you get from humans. So synthetic GPT-4 data is so at the end of the day, we still depend on some way on the big model, and so then there can be you can kind of leech off that in various ways. But I don't think there's a fundamental way around having such a big gorilla in the room, basically.
Barkeep, I know that you mentioned you've been kind of playing with these models a good bit, starting with GPT-3 and moving through kind of the progressive generations. I'm wondering whether, you've found them to be like, has the prompting improved to the point where you feel like you can get it to do, the task that you want it to be doing? Like, how do you feel about your kind of ability to control these model outputs?
Well, I mean, I think that's kind of a twofold question. So I think there's kind of any person's individual abilities to learn how to enter prompts that are going to get them the results that they want. And I think there's been a lot of really good work by a lot of researchers about, that kind of prompt engineering, right? The idea of how do you enter something to an AI model. And so have my own skills as a prompt engineer really improved in the last year dramatically? Yes. And so, right, so my ability to use any given AI model, whether it's GPT or it's Claude or it's Llama or whatever, what have you, right? That has really gone up. I think if we're particularly thinking about GPT as kind of the market leader here, um, I think that its ability to let me shape it in ways that I really want to shape it have really increased. And so I particularly think the ability to, kind of as Bob was saying, to give it a smaller set of data that I want it to then build and react from is a really underexplored piece of it in the kind of the broader consciousness. But I think as Wikimedians has a lot of potential for us to say, I want you to use this data, even though it has also been trained on the broader Wikimedia movement, right? So by giving it that focus, I think you get some really interesting and positive results as a Wikipedian out of it. And then conversely, right, some of the safety pieces have really increased. And so there were things that I could do in 3 or 3.5 that 4 will not let me do because those safety pieces and rail guards are in there now, even as I may be able to get a Gemini or Llama to still give me those results if I engineer my prompt in the right way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's kind of reassuring to hear too, that you feel like you've been able with, because I think those sorts of I guess few shot often a bit like zero shot, those sorts of examples where you can say like, here's 1 or 2 things about how I want the model to proceed. And having that be a successful strategy is very nice, because then that I think does open up this opportunity for like, okay, we can have this model kind of hosted outside of Wikimedia, and like still be able to direct it towards kind of Wikimedia related tasks and have it support those well. I want to put a pin because I have some thoughts around kind of some of that alignment stuff. But I know, Mariana, too, we've chatted very briefly about some of these, like how do you actually provide access to these models to, like, and putting kind of structures and support around that. So I want to give you some space to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we've been saying, there's so many very, very niche opportunities for AI to come in very hyper-specific workflows and improve things. But you kind of need, 3 things. You need someone who knows how to work with the AI, knows how to prompt engineer it to do the thing that it's going to do, someone who understands those processes really well, and access to usually like a paid version of the tool. So GPTs are only available to subscribers of ChatGPT, and you can't easily use them unless you pay $20 a month. So one thing I've been thinking about a lot is how do we kind of support each of those different steps in actually ensuring that these tools aren't just being used for commercial purposes and none of the benefits making it to our ecosystem. And one model I'm thinking about is the Wikipedia library, which might seem completely unrelated to anything we're talking about today. It's a program that is essentially a set of partnerships with major content publishers, for-profit, paywalled content publishers like JSTOR and Elsevier, that allows Wikipedians, active Wikipedians, to access those resources for free and use them to create content and source the content to the publishers, which drives traffic to their websites. So that's an incentive for them, and huge incentive to, amazing opportunity for our community to get access to these things that they would either have to be academics to use through institutional subscriptions, or would have to pay a ton of money to use. So I'm wondering if things like that might be in the future some kind of model to explore. But I think that's only the access piece of the puzzle. There's also this kind of community of practice that's required to understand how to use these tools as they're emerging, as they're changing every day, as new features are coming out, as new entrants are coming in, different models, open source, for profit. I'm really curious about that piece too, and how we can support kind of capacity building and growth and understanding and using these tools across all of our many communities, our global communities as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point around capacity building. I want to put a pin on that. I think maybe especially folks in the audience might have some thoughts too around that. And Barkeep, I'm sure you have some thoughts too. So let's make sure we get back to that topic. One of the things too I've been thinking about in this space around, these models seem to be working relatively well for us. And within, I think outside of Wikimedia, this also they talk about alignment quite a bit. Like, are these models aligned? And I think to some degree we've been getting this, and they're certainly not perfectly or maybe even well aligned with Wikimedia and like some of our principles around verifiability and things like that, that we've seen some improvements over the last year. But I think in these models' ability to understand things like wiki text, and maybe understand some of these policies out of the gate, we get some of that for free coming from, or not for free, we've earned it to some degree because the content being produced by the communities is high quality. And so as a result, these model developers are spending or putting them as high weighted content within these models. But as we move to these bigger and bigger models, we're seeing a lot more kind of multimodal models over the last year. That's been a big trend. We've noticed, these ability to work with images and things like that. And that is a space where we have, so we don't have a dump of Wikimedia Commons, for instance. So where kind of Commons imagery is entering into these models is generally through, I assume, kind of Wikipedia and inclusion in Wikipedia. And so I am a little worried to some degree that, we might not be continuing to get some of these like, oh, the model understands this and this and this about the ecosystem, and we can just kind of nudge it to our very specific tasks. And I'm worried to some degree that that is not something we should always take for given. And I think within that space, I've been thinking about a lot of like, to what degree should we be more engaged with alignment of these models, like putting out instruction tuning tasks and things like that to try to say, as you're saying, Mariana, too, there's this whole ecosystem of these different models, and trying to say like, hey, model, like all these models, we would expect or hope that like you can do well on these sorts of tasks, and in order to hopefully make kind of bridging between them and how Wikimedians actually want to use them a little bit simpler. And so I guess that's a very large comment, but I'd be curious to hear if folks have thoughts about like, how do we continue to ensure some of this alignment between these models and the sorts of uses that we want for them on the projects. I'll open that to anyone, but go ahead, Bob.
So, maybe I can jump in here. I think it's not necessarily bad if Wikipedia is only a tiny fraction of the training data. Because when there is more other data, that means there's a lot of other stuff to source from, right? Like if you want to make Wikipedia better, it's good if there is more knowledge that if it's mostly Wikipedia, then there's nothing additional to be learned, right? I think what's important is to make that kind of knowledge accessible then. And if it's knowledge that's sourced from YouTube videos or from images that are not from Commons, then that's good. And this alignment question becomes very important, though. So one thing that actually surprised me about the last year, or years rather, is how far we can get with this next token prediction approach, and how simple it turned out to incorporate also many modalities. You just tokenize everything. That's kind of the mantra: tokenize everything. You tokenize the images, you tokenize the text, you tokenize videos. And that way, everything kind of speaks the same language. So it's in principle quite easy to source this information. But now, how do we make it useful to Wikimedia? And I think that's an interesting question. And this alignment, though, seems to be just, in my view, is just like a little bit of sugarcoating on top. Like there's this raw force of the next token prediction abilities. That's really where the knowledge of the model resides. And the rest is just like a little bit of, is a little bit of putting the model to school, to behave well and so on. But it's massive abilities to reason and so on, that really comes mostly from the next token prediction. And since I guess since it's been so easy to jailbreak some of these models, it also shows that it's not so hard to shape the model behavior for the better or for the worse. But I'm optimistic that for Wikipedia, it might be possible to take a model that's actually not inherently a Wikipedia model, but to then expose it to kind of the Wikipedia spirit, and make it behave like a Wikipedia. And I like this point that Mariana made about personality. So can we give a Wikimedia personality to the model by making it understand what are the rules and what's the spirit of Wikipedia? This might not be so hard, after the model has learned a lot of general knowledge, to also make it understand how should you behave on Wikipedia. I think it would be super interesting to see this as a community effort also. What are even the kinds of situation where we would like the model to be able to behave? Can we make this itself a kind of Wikipedia grassroots task? Just like Wikipedians come up with their own rules for their communities, can we source from the communities themselves the norms according to which we would like a large foundation model to behave?
Yeah, I really appreciate Bob's vision there, and really kind of share the optimism for what that could mean. I guess where my pessimism creeps in is the challenges around then getting people to actually use it. And so, and I think about the ways that people currently find Wikimedia content now. And by and large, it's often not through, I'm going to go to Wikibooks because I want to find something there. It's not, I'm going to go to Wiktionary necessarily to look up a word. It's, it's the bank shot through kind of a third party piece that is overwhelmingly where our visitors come from. And so even if we put out this really compelling model that shares our values, I'm worried about our ability to then see user adoption of that model. And so I think that's why I really appreciate the efforts that the foundation is doing around working with some of these larger players in the fields, because I think in addition to us putting out our own model that shares our values, doing as much as we can to nudge the people that are going to be market leaders and really have that economic incentive to get users to adopt their model, getting them to align with us on values such as transparency, right? Which I think is a real shortfall of the models at the moment, besides the shortfall of kind of verifiability that has already been talked about. And I think models are improving on the verifiability, right? So I think they have an incentive to get that part right. The transparency piece, I'm not sure, the models have the same the companies inherently have that. And so I think that's a place where the foundation, this is a yes and piece where we need to do our own model that absolutely promotes our values. And I think we also need to work with others who are doing their models to see if we can nudge them closer to what we would like them to be.
Yeah, 100% to all of that. A couple of things. I mean, I think the token success that Bob was talking about, or the success of the token, yes, it absolutely generates really incredible human-looking, human-sounding text, but we know it's prone to hallucination. It's not conveying information, it's not conveying knowledge, it's just predicting the next word, right? And I think what we've seen in the last year is that consumers remain pretty skeptical of that. So people are using ChatGPT for things like helping them write better emails and helping them code and creating kind of creative assets for marketing purposes. But in terms of like getting their knowledge from ChatGPT, that really doesn't seem to be a core use case. So I think we have a real opportunity to influence these AI tool creators to help them actually create products that are more trustworthy by incorporating in, as Bob said, this whole model of what it is to be a Wikipedian, of what it is to actually really critically engage with information, not just to spit out a fact, but to provide references and provide meta information about how that fact was created and who created that fact and when was it created and how strong of a claim is it, and does it appear in other languages, and like all of the things that our projects are so great at putting together into huge bodies of text. I think AI can absolutely leverage in creative and new ways, to provide those kinds of signals in more compelling user experiences, that people might actually want to use, down the line. So I do think huge opportunities for influencing the third-party space in a way that helps them to create things that are sustainable for our movement, as well as useful for their audiences.
Yeah, these are really good points, and there's a question from YouTube that I think touches on some of this and what you were saying too, Barkeep, about like getting to people where they're kind of coming across information. And Marianne, I wanted to ask you a bit about the ChatGPT plugin. The question from YouTube from Lauren was about kind of how do we she was curious about some of the cutoffs as far as like how much content goes through the plugin and how it works. And it had me thinking about, our the first piece you did. I can let you talk about this more. But was like, this very like did an experimental thing. And now we have these GPTs that are kind of like, I think, hopefully making it more accessible for folks to kind of tweak and things like that. But I want to hear your thought about like, what directions that's going in.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things to note. The Future Audiences team, we are not a product or feature building team. So we're not making big investments in new technologies. We're not saying, okay, ChatGPT is the future and let's put all of our eggs in this basket and make a really amazing consumer experience for AI users on ChatGPT. We don't know if ChatGPT is the future. I don't think anyone knows. I don't think Sam Altman knows. Clearly, he hasn't been reflecting. So, and I think it's just as likely that some other platform, an existing platform, a new platform will come around in 6 months or a year or tomorrow, and sort of steal that thunder. And all of the kind of turmoil at OpenAI over the last few months has really solidified that a little bit more even. But as far as the plugin that we built, it was really an opportunity to kind of get into this space and really understand how people would interact with Wikipedia through a chatbot. I think we learned a lot of really important things about sort of what I was alluding to, this core knowledge search, engagement with knowledge, learning use case that we want to support with our projects. It didn't seem to be the thing that people were actually using ChatGPT for. So when we actually surveyed the users of our plugin, they liked it overall. They thought it provided great information. They appreciated that it was there, but they also said that they would just as often go to web Wikipedia, so Wikipedia on web, and read information there as they would use the plugin. So it didn't really seem like it was displacing, going directly to the content itself. And the kinds of users that were engaging with the plugin were also very much our current audience of current fans of Wikipedia, very heavily skewed male, North America and Northern Europe, kind of the audience that's like very techy also and very into adopting new tools. This wasn't sort of like the global Wikimedia or even the global knowledge audience that I think we want to be engaging. This was like a very, very niche crew. And plugins sort of remain this experimental feature within ChatGPT and have actually now basically been sunsetted and incorporated into GPTs, the new product. So, I mean, I, as the person who sort of set up this vision of let's do some quick experiments and tests and not linger too long and try to perfect a product experience, feel like a little vindicated, I guess, by the moves within ChatGPT and OpenAI, that we didn't spend a whole bunch of time trying to really conform to that specific feature set, because that feature set no longer exists. Right. So I think where we're trying to go is grabbing these opportunities where we can to learn more, to provide something experimental to users who are already kind of in an experimental mindset, learn and go and move on to the next thing, and make a bigger set of recommendations about AI that other teams might want to pick up and follow and take up in a bigger way in future years. So what we're learning from AI now is these consumer experiences are changing, they're shifting. Consumers don't yet trust them for general knowledge. I think we have some opportunities to try to influence that, and we're sort of looking at other ways to do that.
Can I share a quick thought? I've noted that our conversation is mostly revolved around basically the reader. How could we make Wikipedia accessible more accessible to readers by having it in a dialogue format and so on? But I think there's tremendous potential also to make Wikipedia easier to navigate for contributors. So I could imagine a help desk where someone shows up and maybe they've never interacted with Wikipedia as a contributor, and they say, "Hey, Wikipedia, how could I help?" And then maybe the model asks, like, "Oh, what do you care about? What are your interests?" And then, "Oh, let me look up which pages actually need input." And then that model could maybe use query Wikipedia with a tool, for example, to look at which pages need references or need to have improvements. And then maybe that could be like a Wikipedia buddy, that could say, "Oh, actually, before you submit your edit, watch out, because what you're about to do is likely to be rolled back because you didn't cite a source, or you are including an image that doesn't have a," and you get the point. So I think there is tremendous potential on both sides. And that's maybe even harder, right? Because Wikipedia is already quite nice to use for a reader. But I think it can be pretty tough for editors, especially for those that aren't familiar.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Bob. I think oftentimes kind of turn towards these use cases around readership or content generation, which aren't necessarily, like, sometimes more straightforward, but like you said, also harder in the sense that there's a lot of there's a lot of kind of existing work in that space, and trying to navigate, like, how exactly do we navigate this hard. Maybe Barkeep, do you have any thoughts then around like processes where you think these sorts of models would be most useful, if we're not focusing on readers and not focusing maybe directly on content generation, where on the backside do you see these models being most helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bob laid out some really good use cases there, and I could certainly see many projects have a help desk or a more friendly tea house, as English Wikipedia calls it, and that kind of metaphor has been carried across some other projects as well. And so I could certainly see that being something that AI could help with. There's been a large initiative around pairing new users up with mentor users, and so that those people have someone to ask to. But at least on English Wikipedia, only about a quarter of new users are ever assigned one of those mentor people, because there's just not enough editor capacity to handle all the questions. And so AI could act on multiple levels, right? Either being a initial mentor itself and screening it out, or helping to make those existing mentors more efficient in the kind of the interactions they have. Because I think one of the values of that mentor relationship is the person to person, right? And I think that is something that the Wikimedia movement is going to offer in a world of AI. I think there will be a appreciation for human qualities, even as we see AI bots take on those human qualities through the ways that they do. I think there'll be an appreciation for genuine human qualities, at least when you look at how automation has played out in other sectors. So I think there is a lot of opportunity there. I also think there's a lot of risk. Mariana talked about the way people use AI to compose emails now, and at least from my perspective as someone that does governance pieces, that lowering of barriers has meant that we have seen an increase in those kinds of appeals. And so where if someone is saying, "I need to be unblocked," before, their skills may have only allowed them to generate 3 sentences, but with the help of AI, they are now able to generate 3 pages that we have to kind of sort through. And so there is kind of that other side. And so I'm hoping that the AI gets to a place where AI can help us deal with AI effectively, right? And so at the moment, there's not always, AI is not really able to detect other AI with great accuracy. There's a lot of false positives and false negatives in the tools that are out there, but I'm hoping that that's an area that will improve in the next 12, 18 months, so that we can understand again where machines are genuinely helping us to be more productive, are genuinely providing us with answers and assistance at a scale and a quality that we couldn't produce, and then where we need and want that human experience, so we're able to distinguish between those things.
I think that's a really great point. If we're in a scenario now where it's easier to produce text than to write text. It was always the other way around, right? It was easier to read than to write. And now so when once it's easier to write, then you need help from machines in order to read, and then we might end up in a scenario where we have machines that write text that is then read by other machines, but the humans are at some point completely cut out, and we can just stand by and watch and hope and pray that hopefully the machines are going to figure it out. So I think that's a real danger.
Yeah, I'm really interested in this. I'm really glad you brought it up, Barkeep. We also have a question from YouTube from Lambert Heller about transparency around training data, and kind of what are the best ways we can create some more transparency around that. So I want to put that question out in case anyone is interested in picking it up. But also this watermarking piece I think is really key. Because with multimodal models, with imagery, with audio, researchers have found pretty good ways to put kind of watermarks in so that you can take an output and say like, oh yes, this was generated by an AI. But text is very low dimension. Don't know the right word to say, but it's very hard to embed a good watermark. And so we haven't seen this, and it seems hard to believe that we will see a good way of kind of embedding these watermarks in AI generated text, which means that we don't have a lot of insight into how much of this content is showing up on the wikis. And I guess I'm curious to hear from folks, like how important is this maybe gap in our knowledge about how much the AI generated content is maybe affecting the wikis, and if you have any thoughts about like the processes or things we could do to try to address this knowledge gap.
I think about this a lot, and it's a big worry for me personally, because I think one of the things that will carry us through the AI revolution is the fact that currently, and hopefully in the future still, people really trust Wikipedia as being the neutral kind of arbiter of disputes, and especially on very contentious topics, having a really factual, neutral, objective point of view on things, as objective as you can be in the world. And I worry that if AI becomes a bigger and bigger part of our projects, it will start to introduce things that aren't so neutral and objective and agreed upon by a community of humans in really nefarious ways. I think about this from kind of like a data perspective, and I think one thing our communities are really great at actually is labeling. There are cleanup templates on almost all articles, not really, but many articles on Wikipedia, for example. And those reflect, humans having gone through and seeing something that was wrong and adding some metadata to the page to indicate that to other humans to try to fix it. I think with AI, we were starting to see AI generated cleanup templates appearing on some content, and wiki projects bringing up community members who are interested in kind of getting together to address issues that might be introduced through AI. And I know from experience of trying to figure out how do I get data on how many AI generated tagged pieces of content are there and how many have been deleted and how many have been deleted over time. That's not very easy to get and to munge. You really have to get into the block logs and the deletion logs and really understand templates and transclusion and substitution. And it's only available per project, so you have to do like a very big research study to unpack all of that. And it's just on English Wikipedia, but what about all the other projects we have? So I really, like, as a community of researchers, hopefully watching this call, I really hope people get interested in this topic and and help us to start to untangle that snarl a little bit, because I think the data is already there in some cases, but I also think there are opportunities for doing more to engage our community in doing what it already does, which is kind of triage incoming content, assign it different categories or labels or clean up statuses, and work to address it.
Or keep not to put you on the spot, do you? Yeah, I think you were about to chime in, so I'll just be quiet.
Well, I mean, I was just kind of thinking about right now there's not, it's core to our project that our information is correct, right? So you go on any project and they're doing their attempt to get it correct. And even when we've had projects that have gone off the rails, through takeover, because takeovers in ways that have caused problems, those editors genuinely did believe that they were trying to provide correct information, even if objectively, like from a neutral and from an outsider perspective, right, that there was an agreement there. So I think that's a core piece. I think that that right now the bots don't, like, that's not necessarily a core value, right, of the bots, that they don't necessarily have that. And I think Anthropic is actually doing the most interesting work here with its AI model Claude, and there was just kind of some research either I think late last week around its ability to get it to produce content that was less charged around protected characteristics, by basically just telling the bot, please don't include this information because it'll get us sued if you do. And then suddenly it was able to produce more neutral information. And so those kinds of pieces are really interesting to me. But I think there needs to be some commitment by the person either using the bot through the way that they're engineering it to have that kind of neutral factual piece, or by the companies that are producing these or bots to having it be correct. Because I think right now hallucinations are charmingly named, and also named in a way that is really designed to kind of say to users that there's, to tolerate them and say that this is just part of the experience. And so you're going to take the good of, now I can write an email much more quickly and with better proficiency than I might have otherwise, with the bad of, if I'm a lawyer, it will make up entire legal cases that will get me in large legal trouble if I actually try to use them. And so I think there needs to be some commitment to that idea of getting it right, rather than just kind of outputting it and meeting the ask. Right. I think that's really where the focus has been of, Isaac, to your earlier question around how easy or hard is it to get the information that you want out of it? I think making that easier and easier has been the ask. And so I'm hopeful at some point there'll be an increased focus then on, we've kind of almost made it as easy as it's going to be. And so now it's about really giving them not just what they ask for, but what they want, which we know from a lot of user research that what you say you want isn't always what your revealed preferences are. And so I'm hopeful that in this next round we can get at those pieces, and or the bots will attempt, as kind of Mariana talked about, will attempt to kind of do its own piece of saying, hey, here's my own confidence in the information that I'm giving you, right? Or here's a potential issue with the response that I'm giving you, and being able to almost do that own analysis in how it outputs to the user.
Yeah, that's this is good. And if I'm thinking about kind of trying to summarize where we're at so far in this panel, I think I've been hearing a fair bit of optimism around the directions in which these tools are going as far as access, and a feeling that, like, yes, these are important to find ways to give Wikimedians access to these really large models, because is this kind of suite of tasks where they're really good at, and they've been getting better at it, and it's getting more accessible. So I've been hearing kind of that piece. Obviously some like skepticism or concerns too around things like, the watermarking, like how do we know like really to what degree these are impacting the projects. And so there's definitely some concerns around that and some pieces around transparency as well. But we have a question from YouTube from Nicholas Vigneron asking about multilingualism, so the states of AI for the languages outside of English. And I think that's a really good pivot at this point to hear from, I guess, Bob. I would like to hear from you about like the degree to which these large models might scale or transfer to some of these other languages. I'd be curious, Mariana, to hear from you about what sorts of kind of experiment you're seeing in these other language editions, just pieces you're hearing from folks and Barkeep. I don't know if you played with it in other languages or not, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. So Bob.
I think there's tremendous potential in this, because once you have the models it turns out that translation is one of the easiest tasks for those models. So once they kind of know something in one language, it's quite easy to transfer it to other languages. So I think there's a huge potential there. But we also have to be careful, because one thing that a lot of people are speculating about, and we're seeing it actually in research also that we're doing, it seems that the models, if you train a model on mostly English, then the model will kind of internally think in English. Like you can dig into the model and try to interpret what is it actually doing. And so this is called mechanistic interpretability. And if you apply some of these techniques, you see that the model is actually kind of computing in English. And then on the last mile, on the last few layers, it maps back to the question, to the language of the input. And so there's a danger that there's a danger that biases the model for the one majority language. But there, I think Wikipedia is actually in a good situation, because sure, there is a bias towards English, but it's not as massive as what you have, for example, in the training data for Llama, where it's like 99.9% English. Wikipedia is more balanced than that. And I think this is something that should be reinforced. There's no way you will ever get, let's say, Swahili content to par with English, because there just isn't enough data. But it's we can have a much better rate than in many of the standard models, I think.
Yeah, I think what's been really interesting is, on the one hand, hearing from a lot of community members who have been experimenting with ChatGPT mostly, and sort of finding that it performs much better at translation tasks than Google Translate, let's say, on the one hand. And on the other hand, looking at the ChatGPT Wikipedia plugin data, which we sort of coded internally the responses, the questions and the responses, to see, how accurate the information was to plugin users in different languages. So English, Japanese, Russian, German, I think were the big ones that we looked at. And what we saw was English was really, really high quality, and the other languages a little less so. There were more hallucinations, and we weren't really sure if, there are a few things that could indicate. One thing we haven't really talked about is how difficult it is to assess these tools, like the output of these tools. It's very labor intensive. You need to basically hire or volunteer humans to look through and code and read and analyze and label data, which is very time consuming and difficult. And the model might change tomorrow, and then you'll get different responses. So how do you even evaluate, is this producing accurate information over time? It's a really, really big challenge. And then to add the language variable to the mix, right? That's, if we want to serve every human knowledge in their language, that means we would have to, have every single human verifying the output to make sure it's correct over time. Just a huge fundamental kind of blocker to leveraging this kind of technology, I think. And I'm curious to see in the industry how researchers kind of overcome this hurdle, because I certainly don't know what it is, other than just paying a lot of humans to do the work of looking through these things. But there's also this question of if we limit the knowledge base of these things to specific Wikipedia language projects, which we would want to do in a lot of good ways, or for a lot of good reasons, I think, because those communities have come together and made those projects. They haven't just translated English Wikipedia, they've created their own knowledge base. Presumably that might have very important reasons for being different from English. But does that then produce lower quality results through chat agents and LLMs because there's less data to pull from, and GPT is really good at filling in the gaps with things that sound really convincing but aren't actually true? I don't know whether that's the case or not, but another really important aspect to consider for the multilingual support thing.
Yeah, I think that stuff is hugely important, and it's always like a nice time to plug the importance of projects like Wikisource too, because for these AI models, they only have access to what is actually digitized and available to them, and that's what Wikisource is doing, some really amazing work to like take some of these languages that maybe don't have as much content available on the web, and digitize it and make it accessible so that's more easy to incorporate in the Wikimedia projects, but that has the nice follow-on effect too of it's more easy to incorporate this knowledge into AI models as well, and hopefully kind of, yeah, as you were saying, Mariana, like less hallucinations, less attempts to fill in the gap, usually incorrectly, and actually filling it with verified and important knowledge sources. That point, we're coming close to our hour, so I'm going to actually pass it off to Leila, who I think has a nice closing question for our panelists that touches on, kind of looking ahead now, which is, I think, a nice place to leave it.
Cool. Thank you so much, Isaac, and thanks everyone for the discussion so far. So I wanted to ask if each of you can share, is there something that we broadly defined different actors within the Wikimedia movement are not doing today with respect to LLM and AI topics that you think we should do or we should do more of? I'm looking for blind spots. What are our blind spots, in your opinion, from where you're sitting, or where are our opportunities in terms of what we can do that we haven't talked about?
I'll go first. I would really want to highlight what Bob was talking about earlier in response to this question. I think that there's probably a massive need for increased resources around us producing the vision that we want around AI, and that we can't just count on industry actors to do that. And so us creating the systems and the resources and the ability for us to harness all the things that make all of our volunteer projects work so well. I think creating those same schemas and foundations in an AI world and a large language model world is going to be a really important piece. And so, and I think so that's kind of the kind of blind spot and opportunity that I see from my perspective.
I agree. I think specifically, so we talked a little bit about the idea of using AI for kind of newbie question answering, mentoring, helping newcomers. But I think there's a huge opportunity space of we haven't really talked about, of helping existing users just do what they do every day, but better, faster, easier. A lot of the ways that AI is being used by kind of day-to-day people use ChatGPT as a personal assistant, as a way to automate and speed up kind of boring tasks or annoying tasks or things that just take too much time to get to the fun stuff. And I would love to see us find applications of AI that do just that help our existing communities and new communities coming in tomorrow, to kind of make the boring stuff faster, easier, more efficient, to be able to get to the fun stuff, the things that really ignite people's love of knowledge and sharing knowledge and discussing and consenting around knowledge, which I think is the core human activity that is irreplaceable by AI.
So there seems to be nice convergence. Actually, when I jotted down my quick list, both of the points that Barkeep and Mariana mentioned are actually on that list. One was, let's not forget the editors. In addition to the readers, then building data sets, curating data sets. So in the industry, there seems to be a new realization, which kind of seems funny for someone who comes also a bit from the data mining realm, that curating and deduplicating and so on data sets is really important. That's what they're realizing now. And but I think it's kind of it's useful to remind ourselves of that. The data is the key thing. And so this is something, though, that the Wikimedia community has been great about, curating this amazing corpus, and maybe I think thinking about how these principles could be transferred from writing the text to shaping the model. I think there's an interesting thing there that shouldn't be neglected. And then evaluation. Mariana mentioned this. So this is also becoming really, really key in the industry. People don't know how to evaluate their models anymore. There are all these NLP benchmarks, but they don't cut it anymore. The models are better than the benchmarks, basically. And then we don't really know. Evaluating becomes so hard because you need to do it live, basically. It's not, you cannot pre-compile a test set. You need to basically react to whatever the model does, and that is very expensive. But again, Wikimedia has this amazing community that can come together, I think, to do this. And then finally, I think an aspect that I think personally is very important, to not think of LLM-based agents as the LLMs only. The LLMs are kind of the engine that drive the agent, but there's more. If you look at ChatGPT, it already starts to use tools. For example, calculators, web search. If you look at Bing Chat, it uses web search and then compiles the answers from that. So I think there's a huge opportunity here for thinking of an entire tool set. How can we leverage what we already have in Wikipedia as a database, and now there's kind of an agent that's wrapping around, can use that, can use many other things, and to orchestrate basically all of that. I think there are huge opportunities there. And then also incorporating humans in that. Humans can be part of that. The model can also recur to humans and say, hey, actually, let me ask Barkeep 49 how he would say that, and I'll get back to you tomorrow. You know, sometimes computation can be slow, and it's made better that way. It doesn't always have to be in the second that someone asks the question. Yeah, those were some of my thoughts.
No, these are really great thoughts. And if I'm kind of synthesizing across the three and pulling, you know, Barkeep, you were mentioning kind of the piece about the importance of being proactive and guiding these, and Mariana, the piece about like helping the models, make sure they're taking some of the kind of maybe more boring tasks to open up the space for the more exciting kind of collaborative knowledge production. Bob, what you were saying about data sets and curation, I definitely have kind of a to-do for myself to really be thinking through. You know, in the first round of these things, it was just, okay, we've got, you know, Wikipedia is a big part of their data set, and thinking through kind of in the next generations of these models, maybe if there are tasks and things like that, that we can be more proactive to say like, hey, we expect these models to be able to do these certain things well, if they're going to be useful for Wikimedia projects, and for like this mode of, you know, content, like knowledge vetting and pieces like that. I think that's a good place to leave it. I'm going to pass it to Kinneret to say thanks and kind of close us out.
Thank you, Isaac. And thank you, everyone, for joining the showcase today and this awesome discussion. I especially want to thank Barkeep, Bob, and Mariana, our speakers, Isaac for moderating, as well as being part of the coordination team. So thank you, Isaac and Pablo, for helping with this. Also, thanks to Kevin and Emerald for their support with the audio and video. Our next showcase will be on Wednesday, January 17th, 2024, and we'll present 2 great pieces of research around how to design tools to better incorporate policy pages into the editing process. Looking forward to seeing you all there. Thank you.